Okay, good evening, and can I welcome you all to the first meeting of the Applications Committee for this municipal year. Before we make a start, we've got some notices that I need to run through. So the first one is to do with evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff, and please also make sure all your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. Okay, we haven't got any apologies. I think we've got everybody here now, so we've got all 10 of our councillors. Next item on the agenda is agenda item number 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Now, because obviously I wasn't an elected councillor at the time, I cannot propose those minutes. So thank you very much, Councillor Shepherd, for proposing. Do I have a seconder for those? Thank you, Councillor Rudkin. Okay, can we have a vote? Sorry, Councillor Shepherd.
Another reason. I wonder, with your indulgence, Chair, if you would be kind enough to write a letter of thanks to former Councillor Bill Hancock, in the fact that he ran this planning committee for a long time, and I think it would be good for this planning committee to give our thanks to him for the service he gave.
It's a letter of thanks to Councillor Hancock for all his work on chairing that committee. Thank you. So if we've got a seconder, can we have a vote on that, please, to accept those minutes? All those in favour? Okay. Against? Any abstentions? Okay. One abstention, which is Councillor Condacor. Okay. The next item we have on the agenda are declarations of interest. Councillor Condacor.
For the BP garage, me and my wife have objected to the similar application before and asked this identical application to come to the committee. So I'd like to speak at the beginning of the deliberation and then leave the chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
But on item 1, Coventry Road, I've had a huge amount of contact with residents over the last year for items associated to the application and other. And there could be an inference of predetermination. So, same situation, if I can speak on the item but not take part in any debate or vote. Thank you.
And one of the outside interests is the Bedworth Neighbourhood Watch.
Agenda item number 6, application for... Sorry. Councillor Shepherd. Oh, sorry, Councillor Shepherd, my apologies.
Outside bodies and representations. I'm no longer on those bodies, so if they can be removed, please.
Item 6 then, application of planning permission on which the public have indicated the desire to speak. Just to remind members of the public, they will be allowed 3 minutes in which to make their representations on that item. Okay, so in that case, that's everything covered in terms of the legality. So moving on then to the first item which we're going to look at tonight. So I'll hand over to our caseworker, Claire. Thank you.
This application is for the creation of 3 residential units in the form of 3 static caravans on land to the rear of 71 to 77 Coventry Road, Walkington. Objections have been received as detailed on the agenda and addendum, raising issues including that the development is inappropriate in the green belt, impact on visual amenity of the green belt, and highway safety issues. In terms of the principle of development, policy DS3 of the Borough Plan states that development outside of settlement boundaries is limited to certain uses, such as agriculture, forestry and leisure, that can be demonstrated to require a location outside of a settlement boundary. This site is located outside of the Bulkington settlement boundary, which is shown as the yellow boundary line on the plan on the screen. The proposal is for 3 residential units in the form of 3 static caravans. Whilst caravans are not typical traditional residential dwellings, they would still provide residential accommodation. Paragraph 73 of the NPPF sets out the requirement for the council to identify a deliverable 5-year supply of housing land. As of the 1st of April 2020, the council has a 5.135 year of housing land supply, and therefore it is not considered that the proposed residential units are required in terms of contributing to housing land supply. As the site is located outside of the defined Bulkington settlement boundary, the proposal is considered inappropriate in principle. The site is located within the green belt. Paragraphs 143 and 145 of the NPPF and policy DS7 of the Borough Plan make it clear that there is a general presumption against an inappropriate development, which by definition is harmful to the green belt. The NPPF confirms that inappropriate development, paragraph 144 of the NPPF confirms that in considering any planning application, local planning authorities should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the green belt, and that very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the green belt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. Paragraph 145 of the NPPF sets out certain types of development which are considered acceptable within the green belt and states that new buildings are inappropriate except in very certain circumstances. The proposed development does not fall within any of the acceptable uses and as such would constitute inappropriate development which should be given substantial weight. In terms of the impact on the openness of the green belt, paragraph 133 of the NPPF states that the fundamental aim of green belt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open, and that the essential characteristics of green belts are their openness and permanence. The site is ultimately an open area of green space and a field bounded by mature hedging in part to the rear of the existing established residential private amenity areas of properties along Coventry Road. The area to the north of Coventry Road and to the southwest of the site is undeveloped and has a very open character. Officers consider that the loss of this open gap would have a detrimental impact on the openness of the green belt and would introduce permanent development. The surrounding land is predominantly open countryside and the application site is contiguous with that part of the open green belt. Consequently, officers consider that the proposal would introduce development in an area which currently has an open feel and therefore create significant harm to the openness of the green belt. The NPPF sets out the 5 purposes of including land in the green belt. These are to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another, to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment, to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns, and to assist in urban regeneration. The site is identified in the joint Greenbelt study which was prepared as part of the Borough Plan as parcel BU2. The study found that this parcel performed well against most of the Greenbelt purposes and was considered a medium performing Greenbelt parcel. Officers consider there is conflict with the first purpose, which is to check the unrestricted sprawl of built-up areas, as the proposal would lead to further built development in the Greenbelt. There is also conflict with the third purpose, which is to safeguard the countryside from encroachment. The site is currently open, and as is the surrounding land to the east and south-east. It is considered that development would encroach into an open part of the Greenbelt. Overall, in terms of the impact on the greenbelt, officers consider that the significant harm to the openness and the moderate harm caused by conflict with two of the purposes add to the substantial harm by reason of inappropriateness, which is in conflict with the MPPF and policies within the Borough Plan. No very special circumstances have been demonstrated which would outweigh the harm by reason of inappropriateness to the greenbelt. Access to the site is intended to be via the existing drive and track located between 69 and 71 Coventry Road. Each unit would have a parking space. The MPPF states that development should only be refused on highway grounds if there will be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, which would be severe. County highways have been consulted and have no objection, subject to a condition relating to the widening of the access to 5 metres for the first 7.5. Turning to visual amenity, the MPPF states that planning policies and decisions should ensure that developments are sympathetic to local character and history, including the surrounding built environment and landscape setting, but while not preventing or discouraging appropriate innovation or change. Policy BE3 of the Borough Plan states that all development proposals must contribute to local distinctiveness and character. The site is located to the rear of properties which front Coventry Road, which is of a uniformed linear formation, which could be considered ribbon development. The 3 units would be located to the rear of the properties and would therefore constitute backland development. Consequently, officers consider that the proposed development would depart from the existing characteristics of the surrounding area, street scene and built form, contrary to the visual amenities of the area. In terms of residential amenity, distance standards are met in relation to the existing properties along Coventry Road. Environmental Health have been consulted and have raised no objection in relation to the impact on surrounding properties. They also state that as the site is approximately 250 metres away from the railway and set well back from the road, they are not concerned about noise impacting the site itself. In conclusion, the site is outside the settlement boundary of Borkington, would be inappropriate development in the greenbelt, would have a significant impact on the openness, and would be backland development out of keeping with the existing pattern of development. The recommendation is therefore one of refusal, as detailed on the agenda and addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire, for reading that. Before I move to ask for a debate, I believe Councillor Smith would like to speak on the item.
As the ward councillor, I'd ask that members of the committee support the officer's recommendation to refuse planning permission for this application of 3 residential units in the form of 3 static caravans. This parcel of land is designated Greenbelt and has been highly valued for many decades by the row of residential houses whose gardens border it. The National Planning Policy Framework is quite clear that development should be sympathetic to local character and history, including the surrounding built environment and landscape setting. It's clear that the application proposes backland development that's totally out of keeping with the characteristics of the surrounding area and will cause great harm to the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. The MPPF also states that when considering any application, substantial weight should be given to any harm to the greenbelt, unless very special circumstances exist. There are no special circumstances put forward to support this application, and the damage inflicted on this piece of greenbelt by the applicant has already been considerable, prior to this application even being considered. This piece of greenbelt is highly valued by residents and deserves to be protected from unwanted, unsuitable and inappropriate development such as the application before you. I would urge you please to refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So the recommendation then is for this committee to refuse planning permission for reasons as indicated. Do I have somebody who is prepared to propose that? Thank you very much, Councillor Condacor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, thank you. Okay, because we've now obviously had it proposed and seconded, we can move to the discussion. So is anybody who would like to speak on this item? Councillor Condacor.
Could I cycle down the Coventry Road, well, not recently obviously, but quite a lot, and all the plans have got north in all sorts of different directions. I don't know if it's the applicant who provided the plans and the arrows to the north, but I think as you're going to Coventry, this is on the left-hand side, just before you go. So I really do agree with the officer's recommendations, because it is very open behind that. But I would ask that in future we have better sort of orientation of maps or norths, because I couldn't get my head around it until I saw the railway line where this was. But I really do agree with the officer's recommendation. This is classic backyard development on Greenbelt, so I'm happy to support the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Would anybody else like to speak on the item? No, in that case, can we move to the vote? So all those in favour of the recommendation, which is to refuse planning permission? Okay, so that's carried unanimously. Okay, sorry, Councillor Evans.
On declarations of contact with this Willis Grove application. This came to a planning committee, what was it, 12, 18 months ago. I was a substitute at that committee, but I did visit the site beforehand, and a number of residents approached me, so I just wanted to make clear that I didn't indicate at the time how I would vote. Thanks.
Can we now move to... Sorry. Okay, we're just going to go and check to see if there are any members of the public for the second item on the agenda before we make a start. Okay, so if we can now look at turn to item number 2 then. So Claire, as the case officer, would you like to take it away, please?
This application is for the erection of a 4-storey building to provide 9 two-bed apartments. It is almost identical to an application that was submitted in 2019, which was refused. It is being reported to committee to gain members' approval to defend and appeal against non-determination of the planning application. The council are no longer the determining authority, since the applicant has appealed against non-determination of the application to the planning inspectorate, who will now determine the case. In accordance with the scheme of delegation, this application received more than 5 objections, and therefore is being reported to committee so that the council can then respond to the planning inspectorate with whatever outcome the members decide. The application hasn't been determined as there were outstanding issues which I believe the agent wanted to try and address, which hasn't been the case. The objections received raised issues such as loss of privacy and increased overlooking, loss of light and amenity for existing neighbours, impact on highway safety and additional traffic, loss of visual amenity, the layout and the large building are out of character with the surroundings, insufficient off-road parking, access issues and increased noise and air pollution. In terms of the principle of development, the proposed use of the site for residential has been somewhat established previously by the inspector's decision back in 2012, which, although the appeal was dismissed, this decision was only refused on the basis of land instability, and therefore, by implication, the principle was accepted. Following that appeal decision, further planning applications were submitted, which demonstrated that the land was safe. Therefore, the matter of land instability was removed. The previous inspector's decision from 2012 found the proposal for a pair of semi-detached houses to be acceptable and was given permission in April 2014. That permission has now expired without the development being implemented. The principle of residential development on the site is therefore considered established and acceptable. The application before you is a resubmission of a previously refused application which was refused for 3 reasons. One being the creation of a sense of overlooking and loss of privacy to the rear gardens of 31, 33, 35, 37 and 39 Downing Crescent. That it did not create a cohesive group in relation to neighbouring buildings or the local area and was an isolated backland development, and also that it had not been demonstrated that there will not be a severe detrimental impact to the highway safety of the area. This application should be assessed on its own merits, whilst ensuring that the reasons for refusal are now satisfied. In relation to highway safety, access to the site is intended to be via the existing small track to the side of 32 Willis Grove. So that's just shown there at the bottom of the screen. And the land under the ownership of Network Rail as a buffer to the railway lines which run roughly north-south past the side of the site. The access is narrow and meets the highway just at the turning head of Willis Grove. County Highways have been consulted on the development and to date have not provided a response. Nevertheless, they provided comment on the almost identical scheme assessed in 2019 and raised an objection on the grounds that it has not been demonstrated that refuse vehicles can safely access and egress the site, or that there is sufficient space to manoeuvre. There was also insufficient detail provided on how the access will be incorporated into the existing turning head, and it also had not been demonstrated that sufficient forward visibility can be achieved in both directions, and that further information should be submitted to demonstrate that 2 vehicles passing each other on the access would have sufficient space. Consequently, officers consider that the objection has not been satisfactorily overcome and that the impact on highway safety could be severe, and without these matters being sufficiently demonstrated by the applicant, a refusal on these grounds should be maintained. Turning to visual amenity, the character of the surrounding area is that of a mix of 2-storey residential properties. Willis Grove is characterised by uniform blocks of terrace properties in groups of 4, and properties within Downing Crescent are 2-storey, generally semi-detached properties. The existing street scene is almost entirely road-facing, following a linear formation. The siting of the proposed development would be considered backland, contrived and incongruous, being that it is located on the land to the rear of the existing dwellings, out of keeping with the existing built form of the area. The site is bounded by properties to 2 sides and the railway running along the western edge, being roughly triangular in shape. There will be no dedicated road frontage, and further to that, the development will be sited so as to be concealed from much of the road, with only fleeting glimpses visible from the access road between the existing houses. Officers consider that this backland development will be out of character and not in keeping with the existing layout of the area, contrary to the Sustainable Design and Construction SPD. In terms of residential amenity, a good deal of land has been excavated from the site, and it is the intention of the proposal to site its ground floor car parking area under ground level, with 3 storeys of residential above. The excavated part of the site would be to a lower level than the rear gardens of properties in Downing Crescent. Consequently, the 3-store building proposed would be lower than expected, but still appear above the rear boundary fencing of neighbouring properties within Downing Crescent. The elevation facing properties in Downing Crescent would have habitable room windows located within it. The Sustainable Undesigned Construction SPD clearly states that where 3-storey development is proposed, a distance of 30 metres separation would normally be required. The SPD also requires habitable room windows above ground floor which overlook neighbouring gardens to be at least 7 metres from the boundary. The proposed scheme is contrary to both of these standards and therefore would be could lead to significant overlooking to properties in Downing Crescent. The plans state that the windows on this elevation would be obscure glaze with restricted openings, but as some of these windows are the only windows to habitable rooms, it is not appropriate to obscure glaze them, as it would not provide a satisfactory level of amenity for potential future occupiers, and is contrary to standards contained in the SPD. No habitable room windows are proposed to the elevation facing south towards the rear of properties on Willis Grove, and distance standards are met in relation to those properties. In conclusion, the proposed scheme has not overcome the previous reasons for refusal. It would introduce an incongruous backland form of development into the area, which would be at odds with the existing pattern of development. In addition, it does not comply with the separation distance standards and would result in a severe detrimental impact upon highway safety. The recommendation is therefore that the Council should respond to the Inspectorate detailing that their application should be refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire. I don't believe we have any speakers on this item from the general public, and I don't believe we have any written representations either. Is that correct? Okay, so if that's the case, then we can move straight to the motion. So the motion is to recommend refusal of planning permission for reasons as laid out. Do I have somebody who is prepared to propose that so we can move to the debate? Councillor Rudkin. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smith. Thank you. Do I have anyone who wishes to speak on this item? Councillor Evans.
The officers, if I may. It's referenced in the report that Network Rail have submitted a holding objection. Are you able to give some more details on that objection, please?
Councillor Evans.
Would personally agree with the recommendation. I have to say I'm somewhat surprised that the Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service haven't responded to this application, because after visiting the site, I'm really not confident that a fire appliance would be able to access the entrance to this site. So my view is, if members were minded to go against the officer's recommendation on this, I would strongly advise perhaps deferring the item until we await a response from the fire service. But at the moment, I'm pleased with the recommendation, and it's one that I will support.
Any other councillors who wish to speak on the matter? So Councillor Condacore, followed by Councillor Rudkin.
Yeah, just to clarify from the officer's report, that there's the principle of building 2 houses on the site would be acceptable because that's already an extant application. So we're just talking about the size and scale of this effectively. So in saying it's an inappropriate development, we're saying it because of the size of it, not because of the principle of development. And can I just get officers to clarify, in the 5-year land assessment, effectively this is currently down as 0 dwellings, and it would be, so we're not losing any, I think, from the borough plan effectively. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you're quite right, Councillor. There was an application for 2 houses which was allowed at appeal, but that permission has actually expired, so it's not extant. So this wouldn't, at the moment, yeah, it's 0 in terms of housing numbers. That appeal decision did establish that some form of residential development may be acceptable on the site in the form of 2 houses, but what you're looking at is a block of apartments, which is different, obviously, to the previous appeal decision.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Conticore?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that our objection wasn't taking away the right to build 2 houses on the site. We're only objecting to the scale of what's being built effectively.
As I said, that permission has expired, so they would have to apply again if they wanted to apply for 2 dwellings on that site. It would involve a fresh application because that permission has expired.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rudkin.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Chair. I would support comments that Councillor Evans has made. I have regarding the fire. I have serious reservations about this, and I can't believe it's before Planning Committee again. I'm quite frustrated, as you could probably tell by my voice. I would urge, if members, I support reasons for refusal, and I would urge members, if they are thinking about going against officers' recommendations, to visit the site, because the damage that has been caused is it's unbelievable. I would seriously recommend that members of the committee actually visit the site. But I thoroughly support the reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Any other councillors that wish to speak on the item? No, in that case, we'll go to the vote then. So can I have a show of hands then for all those in favour of recommendation to refuse planning permission? So that's carried unanimously. Okay, well, be a brief pause now because I believe we've got to change over our case officers, and we have some members of the public who will be ushered in for the next item. So I could just ask for your forbearance for a minute or so, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for your forbearance on that while we just change over. We do have a couple of members of the public who wish to speak on this item. Can I please just take this opportunity to remind you that you are allowed to speak for 3 minutes on the item, and it will be timed. Obviously, if you only have sort of a sentence or two to say at the end and you overrun slightly, I will allow it, but I'm not going to allow sort of reams of additional speaking, so just so you're aware. And obviously, I'll give you your cue as to when you can make those representations. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So we're now ready to move on to item number 3. So I'll hand over to Darren, our case officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies about that short changeover break. This application is a full planning permission for the erection of a new detached dwelling and an extension to the existing dental surgery at 35 Manor Court Road, Nuneaton. The current site contains a detached 2-storey building on the corner of Manor Court Road and Earls Road. The property was originally a domestic dwelling built in the early 20th century, but is now a dental surgery at ground floor, which includes 3 consulting surgery rooms, 2 stores, a waiting room and a reception. At first floor, the building is currently a 1-bedroom apartment which is only accessed through the dental surgery. The key issues to assess in the determination of this application are the principle of the development, the impact on the conservation area, visual amenity, impact on residential amenity, the impact on highway safety, and the removal of trees from the site, and flooding and drainage. In regard to the principle of the development, there are two clear elements to the proposal. There is the extension to the dental surgery, and there is the new dwelling. The physical extension to the surgery will be conditioned so that the first floor of the dental practice and in the extension combined, there will be no more consulting rooms than there are already on site. So although the overall floor area of the use will increase, the number of consulting rooms will remain the same. The new dwelling makes good use of land within the existing urban area and is considered to be an efficient use of land. The principle of the application is therefore considered to be acceptable. The site is within the Abbey Conservation Area, and as such, regard needs to be had to its impact on heritage and the conservation area. The proposed change of use at first floor of the dental surgery will have no real impact on the conservation area, and there will be no visual impact because of it. The extension to the surgery will have some minimal impact. However, the designs of However, conditions can be used to make sure materials match the existing. The design of the new dwelling is interesting and includes some features of nearby dwellings, such as bay windows, decorative eaves, decorative stone headers, a chimney, and so on. Again, materials will be conditioned so that they ensure that the build is one of high quality. It is considered that there should be no unacceptable impact on the conservation area or on visual amenity from either element of the proposal. In respect of the proposal's impact on residential amenity, as mentioned, the change of use at first floor of the existing surgery and the extension will be conditioned to allow for no more consulting rooms than are currently on site. The extension itself will be slightly larger than the one it replaces. However, windows facing neighbours in the extension will be conditioned to be obscure and non-opening, so there will be no unacceptable impact as a result of the extension. In regard to the new dwelling, the distance standards are mostly met, with only a minor shortfall between the side-facing kitchen window of 33 Manor Court Road and the new house. This is a distance of 12.3 metres, where 14 metres is usually recommended by the Design and Construction SPD. But the proposed house is not directly opposite the affected window, so it is considered that this mitigates the harm to an acceptable degree. The impact on the new occupiers of the new house should be minimal. There are some views from 33 Manor Court Road over the new garden, but this is over a small area of the least usable part of the new garden. In regard to the impact on highway safety, the proposed new dwelling does remove the existing car parking area for the dental surgery. The applicant has attempted to justify this and has submitted a parking space survey which shows that only 2 cars can be parked on the site safely. Residents contend that 3 cars are often parked on the site. Ordinarily, new consulting rooms could be added internally without permission. However, it is proposed to condition the number of rooms to no more than is currently on site, which is 3. The Highways Authority have no objection to the proposal, subject to some conditions. It should also be stated that the new dwelling has 2 off-street car parking spaces, but this is somewhat at the expense of the existing off-street car parking of the dental surgery. It is considered that even though there is to be a loss of parking for the dental surgery use, this is not significant enough to warrant refusal, especially given the lack of any up-to-date car parking standards. The impact on existing trees. Some trees are required to be felled, including leylandii and holly. To ensure that all of the trees on site or around the site are protected, a condition will be added relating to tree protection zones. In regard to flood risk, the site is in flood zone 1, which is at the lowest risk of flooding. The county flood risk team and environment agency were not consulted as part of the application, as it is not a major application. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed on the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Darren. So we do have 2 members of the public who wish to speak on the item. So I'll take you in the order that you're written on my list. So Mr. Smitten.
Okay, start. Okay. I have shown that the rear of the property at 35 Manor Court Road has been used for staff car parking by previous dentists and the current dentists and staff. It is also used for storage of clinical and general waste. I have also provided photographs to show how heavy parking can be in and around Earls Road, including for staff and patients attending 35 Manor Court Road. There are no bus routes running along Manor Court Road for public transport. The applicant claims it is vacant land and to have a tree or shrub that prevents cars being parked in one area, but that tree does not and never has existed. The applicant has also allowed the land to degenerate into an unkempt state. However, rather than clear the land to reinstate car parking for his staff and for safe storage and collection of clinical waste, the applicant prefers to clear it to build a house and use the highway and pavement of Earls Road, Manor Court Road for car parking, whereas reinstating the area as a car park would go some way to easing the parking problem at the junction of Earls Road and Manor Court Road. The Council stated in its Abbey Conservation Area proposals of February 2008 that open spaces are a key feature of the Abbey Conservation Area and that infill is to be resisted. The Council also stated in the 2008 document that car parking is a negative factor in the conservation area. If permission is granted, then the Council is setting a dangerous precedent for other householders and businesses to develop their car parks and garden areas as housing. The proposed development will affect the garden suburb character of the area. Furthermore, the reduction of the wall in the dentist's car park will leave a 6 foot by 5 foot section facing Earls Road on my property, which will look bizarre in the Abbey Conservation Area. The policies referred to in the Council statements on the application refer to the need to create dwellings that, among other things, promote health and well-being, yet the rear of the property and my property, as the Council admits in their comments, will get very little natural light. There's no consideration for the effect on this on future occupants and possible future demands on me to fell trees, a holly, a fir and a laurel that border the side and rear of the garden. My property, numbers 1 and number 3 Earls Road, were highlighted by the Council as having architectural and historical significance, having been designed by H.N. Jepson. Taking into account the doubling up of numbers 1 and 3 and 5 as 7 has given the effect of double bays to offset the double bay design of the proposed dwelling. That doesn't make any sense because all of the houses on down that side of Earls Road have single bays and not double bays. And the border between my house and the rear of 35 Manor Park Road contains several trees and shrubs, including the Leylandy holly and other assorted shrubs, and that border is used by nesting birds and hedgehogs, frogs, dormice and foxes. Okay.
Okay. Is there any councillor who wishes to ask anything, any confirmation of anything at all? Yes, Councillor Condicore.
Are they actually on the site? You just got cut off when you're just describing the wildlife. Can you just explain what's on there?
I've seen foxes in my garden. Whether or not they're passing through or they actually live there, I couldn't actually be clear.
Or points of clarification they would like to make or ask. Have Mrs. West, thank you.
So my husband and I have owned 33 Manor Court Road for 11 years. We live there with our 7-year-old daughter. Our home, the dentist, and 1 Earls Road have formed part of the conservation area since 1996, before its widening in 2008. The houses from Manor Court Avenue to the corner of Manor Court and Earls Road were chosen specifically to fall under a conservation area. There are perhaps older and more beautiful houses. However, a decision was made by the council that our particular corner should be preserved and not developed because of its key location between the hospital, the Abbey and the Manor Court care home. We made a conscious decision to move here and chose our property for its positive features, including space and sunshine, greenery and for its large windows. The proposed dwelling and the larger and taller extension would enclose us on all sides, along with the removal of numerous trees, would take away the open spaces and garden city feel the conservation area seeks to retain. These things are still important to the residents who live here. The conservation document drawn up in 2008 saw minimal possibility for infill building except in the long gardens of Manor Park Road. So there was no buyer beware that our small corner could be built upon, having formed part of a conservation area for 25 years. Rearranging the practice would be wholly negative, putting a compressor next to our bedroom and storing clinical waste near our property. For all its positives, our house is very cold, and 3 minutes is not enough to explain the adverse effects upon us of removing light, sunshine and warmth by a 2-storey dwelling and a large side extension, and we are unable to improve our own situation because of the restrictions on modifying our property. The planning report tells you that the proposed dwelling would be too close to ours, and the majority of our windows come down to knee height. We work from home. I run an online teaching business from a habitable room. In our bathroom, it's not possible to use the toilet, bath or shower without being seen from the window. So our opposition is much more than simply being overlooked and involves the room where we spend the majority of our day and our families bathing and toileting. The dentists choose not to use the car park and let it fall into poor condition. There are around 10 staff and patient cars parking on the corner 6 days a week. We live near 3 churches which will return to daily weddings and funerals, yet no traffic or parking study has been conducted. The clear solution is to reinstate the staff car park, and it can be reversed into like a driveway without marked out spaces. A business should seek to resolve the issues it causes in its community, not add to them. Squeezing a dwelling into its grounds would be detrimental to our health and well-being from further traffic, parking and pollution already caused by the dental clinic. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. West. Okay, are there any councillors who wish to clarify any points on what Mr. West has just said? For your input this evening, it's greatly appreciated. So with that being the case then, the recommendation as it stands is to grant planning permission. Do I have somebody who will propose that so we can move to the discussion? Is there any proposers? Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. And do I have a seconder for that? Okay, Councillor Rudkin. Thank you. Are there any councillors who wish to speak on the item? Councillor Condacourt.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about things happening in conservation areas. I don't know if we can still do site visits, but I think this is a sort of application where we really should have a look at the surroundings, because it's very hard on these black and white pictures to really see what's around there. So I don't know if I can move a site visit or whether we have to do a site visit individually, but I do think I would like to see this before we actually went to determine this application. I'm also got concerns about the transport and parking. I know the dental surgery on the Hinkley Road has cars all over the place, and I can't believe this one doesn't have a similar impact. And it is a very sustainable location if it did have a buzz route, cycle racks and things like that. And I would like, if it was approved, for it to actually have cycle racks installed to try and mitigate some of the people travelling short distances to the dentist. But I said, Chair, I would like to first move a site visit, if we may. Thank you.
Okay, before I go to that, are there any other views on what Councillor Condacourt has said in terms of an amendment? Councillor Shepherd.
I think it would be quite useful in terms of some of the sizes, the distance standards that have been mentioned, that some of them are very well what they shouldn't be. You know, 4.5 metres and it should be 7 and things. So there's a lot of distance angles that I would like to see on site. So I'm happy to support Councillor Condacourt's suggestion.
Yes, this point. Okay. Okay, let's see. Do we have those photos? Do we know?
We have distributed them around the committee earlier today.
Okay, whereabouts are those photos?
Via email.
Right. Okay, so they have been sent to people via their emails today. So have councillors had the chance to look at those today? So I should take that as yes, you have, or no, that you haven't? No, so councillors haven't had the chance to.
I briefly saw them, Chair, but
Okay,
they're
but it's
not like
briefly
seeing
rather
the-
than properly
seeing
looked at
them.
them. Okay, right. Well, we have, if I can deal with the amendment first of all, which has been seconded by Councillor Shepherd. So there is an amendment there to go and actually perform a site visit so we can get a better look at what's going on. So as we've got a proposer and a seconder, can we move that to the vote?
Chair, can I just...
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So through you, we have agreed an extension of time until tomorrow. So obviously the committee just need to be aware that the applicant could appeal non-determination. Obviously what we can do is going away and try and negotiate an additional extension of time. So it's just to be aware of that before you vote on deferring for site visit.
Okay, thank you. So taking that, bearing that and taking that into consideration, all those in favour of a site visit? Okay, so that's 3-4. Against? Okay. And abstentions? And 2 abstentions. So abstentions were Councillor Evans and Councillor Markham. Pardon? Yeah, so that's not carried then. So can we now, are there any other speakers on the substantive item here? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. The only reason I didn't vote for the site visit is because of the concern about the non-determination, that if we don't do that, then there could be potential costs and we might not get what we want if it goes to the inspector. So that was my concern. I do have reservations about this application, Chair. It is within a conservation zone. I believe the timing is very unfortunate because there is a consultation going out, or potentially going out, I should say, in June, because it is coming to Cabinet tomorrow about the future of the Abbey Conservation Zone. So officers may be able to highlight if there's any particular differences which would affect this application compared to the consultation which is going out. But having looked at the proposed drawings, particularly on pages 65 and 66 of our agenda, I am concerned that this would have a detrimental impact on the conservation zone, that the views from the street scene would not be in keeping with the existing conservation zone as it stands. Now, whilst I appreciate that there is a shortage in Nuneaton generally of medical facilities such as dentists, GP surgeries, etc., that is not a reason in and of itself to go against a conservation zone. The conservation zone, in my view, is there for a very good reason. There are items and a general feel, actually, in the conservation zone of a time long gone by, of the Edwardian area in particular, which I believe we need to try and protect and, wherever possible, enhance. My issue is that officer's recommendation is one of approval, but my view is that this they've said in their opinion that the conservation zone would not be detrimentally impacted, but my view is it would be. How defensible would that be at appeal, given that the impact on a conservation zone can be, to an extent, subjective? So I'd be interested to hear officers' views on that, because I am minded to vote against the application because of the impact on conservation, but I'd be interested on officers' views in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I'll come back on that. Just firstly, regarding Councillor Wilson's comment about the emerging SPD on the conservation area, that's at such a preliminary stage that we can't really give any weight to that. It only really gains weight once it's been through a consultation phase and is then adopted. So I am not overly familiar with that document, not working in the policy team. I haven't prepared that, but we can't really give it any significant weight as things stand. In regard to the any reason for refusal, yeah, the impact on the conservation area is to a certain degree subjective in a similar way to the impact on visual amenity is and design. I certainly think if members were minded to, we could come up with, members may think of a reason for refusal on those grounds. It's not as clear-cut as, or black and white as some issues. So thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Ash, do you have anything to add to that at all?
Just to support what my colleague Darren's stated, I think what we said in the committee report is we think it would be difficult to defend. However, I do agree that this is finely balanced, and if members were minded to go against recommendation, we would be able to come up with refusal reasons that would be defendable, certainly not unreasonable.
Okay, thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak on the item? Councillor Shepherd.
Some concerns. I have already mentioned when I supported Councillor Condacor's site visits, I have got concerns about the overlooking that is supposed to be 7 metres and actually is only 4.6. So I think that is quite a large difference. The height of the new wall should be 2 metres in keeping with the rest of the residential buildings there, and it's 2.8. The ridge height is different. It should be 3.5 and it's 3.9. So there's small, while they might only seem like millimetres, it makes a big difference to the street scene and how it looks in a conservation area. I noticed there was a comment from the fire safety county council, so I'd be interested in the officers let me know what that was. And I didn't see anything on the plans in terms of a storage area for the bins and the clinical waste. So I'm not sure where they're storing that currently, in the car park area or non-car park area, depending how you look at it. But I can't see anywhere on the plans where they're going to be moving that to. And that is quite a good concern. I'm concerned about the tree losses and the wall, the loss of the wall, which actually adds to the character of the conservation area. So I've got some real concerns about this one. I think there's a lot of overlooking. I think it would alter how the conservation area looks. And some of the comments that Councillor Wilson made, I totally agree with. Thank you, Chair.
Speak on the item. Councillor Croft.
I'm suspicious of it for similar reasons. I'm frequently bemoaning the fact that we don't look after our heritage enough in this town, and if we've got an area that protects heritage, we really should be doing so. I had a query, maybe you can answer it. Condition 9, you talked about conditioning the materials the new house was supposed to be built out of. It says that you would have to, where is it? They would have to be approved in writing by the local planning authority, but there's no sort of detail as to the materials that you'd approve. Now, this might just be my ignorance of certain planning documents that you've got, but I know that given what a lot of new construction looks like, the materials we might approve might still not be in keeping with the street scene and the area. So could you briefly talk us through that, just so I've got it clear in my head, if that makes sense?
Thanks, Chair. I'll just come back on Councillor Shepherd's point first before I come back to Councillor Croft. Thanks for the query, though. That's namely that the note that was requested from the fire authority, I've just double-checked. It's just a technical point about, here we go. The development needs to comply with approved document B, volume 1, section B5, access and facilities for the fire service. Full details including the positioning of access roads relative to the buildings and the arrangements of turning circles and hammerheads, etc. regarding this can be found at, and then there's a website. So it's just a sort of detailed fire safety matter that's a note that's gone on the approval. Sorry, I'll just get rid of this. And then just to come back to, thanks Chair, come back to Councillor Croft's query. We sometimes list the actual materials that we require. Sometimes that's when we've had negotiations with the applicant and they may put forward a certain material during the application phase that we deem acceptable. Often, especially in conservation areas, we limit that to a condition where they have to submit the detailed samples to us so that we can have a look at what they want to do, and then we can assess that when it comes in and make sure that it doesn't have an effect on the conservation area. So it's essentially keeping that detail reserved until that later date when those details come in. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have any other speakers on this item? No, in that case, I will move to vote. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions outlined. Could I have a show of hands for all those in favour of the proposal? All those against? Okay, and that's, I think, unanimously carried. No, sorry, abstentions? Any abstentions even? No, that's carried unanimously. Oh, we need an alternative now, do we? So Ash, in terms of an alternative, what? Right. Okay, so because that's not been carried then, as it's been explained to me, apologies, first meeting and all that, we now need to have an alternative to the proposal. So Councillor Wilson.
Everything, but I'm sure officers will be able to elucidate on it where necessary. I would move refusal of the planning application on the grounds that it would have a detrimental impact on the Abbey conservation area, and that the cumulative impact both on the street scene and in terms of materials which were mentioned by Councillor Shepherd, heights of walls, etc., would not be in keeping, and also that a number of our distance standards are not met. I appreciate that they are guides, but I believe that a 7 to a 4 metre distance is quite a substantial difference in this particular area. So I think those are all the points I've picked up, unless officers can tell me otherwise. Thank you, Chair.
Just to come back on that, so I'm hearing two main real reasons. One, the impact on the visual amenity of the conservation area and the conservation area itself, and secondly, on residential amenity because of the distance standards breach. If that's what members would like to vote for, that's what I've heard.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Smith and then Councillor Shepherd.
Second that proposal.
Okay, so we have a new proposal then, which is that we reject it on the grounds of obviously the visual amenities, and it's obviously the conservation area. Is that correct? Is that essentially what we're saying? Yep. Okay. It's been proposed and seconded, so if we move to the vote then, so all those in favour? Okay, I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so thank you. So that's carried then. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 4. We'll have a brief pause just so our two members of the public can exit. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us on to our final item of the evening, which is item number 4. So, Darren, whenever you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just 2 secs. This application is for the change of use of the existing car wash to a hot food takeaway and cafe at ground floor and a first floor extension above to provide office space at Anchor Service Station, Nuneaton. As members will have seen from the agenda, there are several key issues to consider in the assessment of this planning application. They are the principle of the development.
Chip shop, we've got a Chinese. But this is just totally the wrong thing. So I totally agree with the inspector and hope you refuse this for the reasons given. And I'll now leave as I've expressed opinions on this in the past. Thank you.
For your input there. So the motion that we have in front of us then is to recommend refusal of planning permission for reasons as stated by our caseworker. Do I have a proposer for that? Councillor Smith, thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Evans, thank you. Okay, because we've now moved that, is there anybody who wishes to speak further on this item? I'm not seeing any hands or microphones raised. In that case, we will go straight to the vote. So all those in favour of a motion to refuse planning permission for this, could I have a show of hands now? All those in favour? Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, I would like to now take this opportunity to say that we have now finished and concluded our business for the evening. I would like to thank all the officers and councillors and members of the public for attending this evening. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.